Well, thank you. I'm really glad to be here. The sort of topic of today's discussion, I guess, is environmental racism and how we can address environmental racism in government. Of course, my current job is I work at the City of Detroit. I'm the senior advisor and legal counsel to the mayor there. I also do have a active environmental law practice. I actively litigate cases sort of on the side as special counsel to the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and the states of New Jersey and Maryland in lawsuits against sort of big corporate polluters. And there's, of course, an environmental justice angle to a lot of that work as well. So, in the Q&A, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about the litigation aspect of my work. But today I wanted to sort of focus on a case study, the case study is around the Gordie Howe International Bridge project, and I understand that you guys had some sort of pre-reading on that. I am going to, if you will bear with me, I'm going to screen share because I got a PowerPoint set up. Unless Bernadette, is that the easiest way to do this? Just screen sharing? Okay, cool.
Exactly. I made you a co-host, and so you can go ahead and share your screen.
So let me pull this up and start screen sharing. So, oops, let's see. So let me go back to the first slide. Try this again. I want to talk about the area of Detroit that's called Delray. Delray is a area in Southwest Detroit, and in many ways it may well be the most polluted sort of area, not just in Detroit but in the entire country. So you can see it's right down there by the water. It's downriver from Zug Island, from the Marathon Oil Refinery. It's right near next to major highway intersection. So there is a lot of environmental problems there. But Delray didn't always wasn't always that way. It was an independent village actually before it was a part of Detroit. There's a lot of history there. Even after it got annexed for Detroit, it originally was a Hungarian enclave in the city of Detroit, and over time, much like the rest of Southwest Detroit, it became sort of majority, Delray and its surrounding areas became majority or plurality, at least Latinx, but it's actually a very diverse neighborhood. It is majority minority like most places in the city of Detroit. At its peak, it was around 23,000 people lived in Delray. But you can see here, you've got the heavy industry in Detroit that moved into the area. The Marathon Oil Refinery, Zug Island, like I said. And if you go to Delray, and this is true to this day, if you go to Delray, you can really smell and sometimes see the pollution down there. Some days, some mornings, there's a thin film of particulate matter that you can see on people's cars. And it's been paired with, as in so many areas, really deleterious health impacts. The asthma rates of kids in the area and Delray and its surrounding areas are sky high. The rates of leukemia are sky high, and it's become a really, for a lot of people, it's become a really unpleasant place to live and to raise families because of the environmental injustice there and because of all the air pollution. So a lot of people left Delray. A lot of people chose to raise their families elsewhere, in large part because of the pollution and the health impacts that came along with that. And the more people left, the more residential property values plummeted. One, because the neighborhood was sort of thinning out, and two, because as industry developed around there, who wants to live there? Who wants to move into Delray, and who wants to raise a family? So you have a lot of people in Delray right now that may actually be at a point where they want to leave. They may have health reasons to leave Delray, but they're in sort of a catch-22 because they held on for so long, because they chose to stay in their neighborhood. Their property is functionally worthless. It's very difficult to get somebody new to move into Delray and to buy your house there, which means that if you're a homeowner, especially, you're sort of stuck. And so today there's fewer than 2,000 people that live in Delray. It's been called the closest thing to a ghost town within a major American city, but there are still people there. And there are people that live there for a variety of reasons. Some are trapped by market forces. They just, they'd like to leave. They'd like to raise their families elsewhere. They can't sell their house, and so they're trapped there. Others have an emotional connection to the neighborhood. They stayed for a reason. It may have been the place where they grew up, or their family home was there. A lot of folks have bought up empty lots next door to them, really cheap, because the property is really cheap down there, and they've built nice little sort of community parks and things like that, and so they like that, and they're not going to get the opportunity to do that elsewhere in Detroit or elsewhere in the country, so they want to stay there, and so you have both sets of people. One is the folks that have an emotional connection, that want to stay there for one reason or another. The other are folks that are trapped by market forces and would like to leave this very polluted area, but cannot. Now, in 2011, Canadian and U.S. officials announced that Delray would be the landing site for the new international bridge that they're building from Canada to the United States. A little bit of background on this bridge. There are currently 2 border crossings in Detroit for automobile traffic. There's the tunnel and there's the Ambassador Bridge. The tunnel is too small to let trucks through. Trucks can't fit in the tunnel. The Ambassador Bridge is privately owned, and a little bit more on that later. But this is one of the most busy border crossing points between the United States and Canada, because if you're shipping something from Canada to the United States, if you don't cross in Detroit, you've got to go around the Great Lakes. And the next nearest border crossing point is sort of in upstate New York, actually. So Canada has a real vested interest, because the United States is Canada's biggest trading partner, in building another bridge to ease the flow of truck traffic. You sometimes have to have delays for trucks of up to 8 hours on the Ambassador Bridge. They often just reroute it to New York. This, of course, causes, in addition to extra air pollution because you're driving further, it adds a lot of cost to business in Canada. It sort of disrupts the trade relationship between Canada and the United States, and it's really inefficient. So Canada has a huge interest in building another bridge across the Detroit River so that they can ship goods back and forth between the United States and Canada in normal times when the border is more open, in a way that's more efficient. Now, this is great. In a lot of ways, this is a great development. If you're a Detroiter, if you're a Michigander, you should want this in Michigan. You should want a new bridge, because what it's going to allow Detroit to be is a much bigger player in intermodal logistics, the business of shipping stuff across the country. That leads to jobs. The estimates are that a new bridge could lead to up to 10,000 new good-paying jobs in Detroit, in an area that could use the jobs, could use the economic development. And by the way, the new bridge is not going to be privately owned, so it will be a boon to the government fisc as well. So on balance, most people really do want this bridge. They don't want to be paying, they want the jobs, they want the economic development. It's going to be a great thing for the city of Detroit and for the state of Michigan in terms of economic development and job opportunities. But here's the thing. They're dropping that bridge in Delray. And the resulting truck traffic in and around Delray is going to further pollute the area. It's already an environmental catastrophe zone. You're going to be dropping truck traffic. The whole point of the bridge is for trucks to come across. They're going to be coming across into this neighborhood, getting onto the highway. The studies show that the fumes that come out of trucks are really, really dangerous, particularly if you live within a certain radius of the highway. It's most dangerous within 100 feet. Then there's like a 300-foot hot zone, and then even up to 1,500 feet, people living in the area have increased risk of asthma, increased risk of cancer, increased risk of heart disease. And again, this is building on top of an already super polluted area. Now you might ask, why was Delray the landing spot for this bridge? And you know, we're talking about environmental racism, and you know, I do not think that initially, that sort of instantly, the reason that they decided to put the bridge in Delray was because of environmental racism. It makes a lot of sense. It's a place that's near a highway, a highway intersection, right? So if the whole point of this is to, you know, increase efficiency and get trucks moving cross border, it makes a lot of sense. But what we often see is that environmental racism is really legacy racism. And why do you think those highways are there and cutting through Southwest Detroit in the first place? When highways were constructed, they weren't built in predominantly white neighborhoods, right? They were built primarily and disrupted communities of color. And you know, at the same time, the reason that it is so polluted down there is because, you know, those are places that people feel comfortable locating heavy industry near. That disproportionately across the country, if you look downwind of any coal plant, any oil refinery, you know, any major industrial facility, what's the nearest neighborhood? It's very likely to be a community that's majority minority. So while the location, I do believe, of the bridge landing in Delray was not necessarily racist in its inception, it built on this historic legacy of environmental racism and environmental injustice, and that is a real problem that exacerbated the injustice that already existed in Delray. So, you know, just to think about the community's future, I just want to take a step back. The status quo were market forces and environmental racism. There were externalities imposed on communities of color, primarily communities of color, though it is a diverse neighborhood in Delray. The Marathon Oil Facilities, Zug Island site, these were ignored historically. The market forces trapped longtime Delray residents in their virtually valueless homes and forced a lot of folks to raise families in an unhealthy environment. Now, how do you address that in government? Well, we have tried some things that I call sort of hierarchical or quasi-democratic approach. And I say quasi-democratic because it's majoritarian. The city tried to, look, Delray in the long term, probably, and everybody knows this, Delray is probably going to be a commercial industrial site in the long sweep of history, especially with the new bridge coming there. The city tried to just wipe out the neighborhood through eminent domain. That didn't work. Previous administrations, the Bing administration in particular, had threatened to cut services to certain Detroit neighborhoods, including Delray, to sort of force people out. And this was a very controversial and very unpopular plan. You think about the folks that are living there, and you're saying, guess what? You stayed in Detroit. You didn't move to the suburbs. You stayed in Delray. Your reward is that we're going to cut services to you and force you out so we can rezone this area as industrial. It never worked. It was incredibly unpopular, and that's a sort of hierarchical approach to doing things in government, which I think, you know, at least in this circumstance, had been extraordinarily unsuccessful. It hadn't moved the needle at all, and was very politically unpopular. So, there was a community group that was organizing for, you know, the minute that they announced the landing site for the bridge. And city council back in 2000, it was right before emergency management took over. They actually empowered this self-organized community group. And they said, you are going to be our sounding board for what you want from this bridge project. It's going to happen. What do you want in terms of community benefits? What do you want in terms of being able to address the historical racist legacy of environmental injustice and moving forward? And what they advocated for, and if you read the documents that were set around, there were a number of things: workforce development. They wanted a community fund, but the two main points were they wanted a voluntary relocation option for people who were trapped there. They said, look, this bridge is going to come in. If we want to move and our property isn't being taken, like to actually build the bridge and the customs plaza, we want the opportunity, if we want to go, to move elsewhere. We don't want to be trapped here any longer. There's enough of us that we don't want to be trapped. But there's some folks that want to stay. And so for those, we want health monitoring and service, and we want the air pollution that's coming from the new trucks to be remediated to the extent possible. So that's what the neighborhood neighborhood group was advocating for, and they were they were very upfront. We're not saying that we don't want the bridge here. They understood the economic boon that would have, and in fact, one of the major thing too is workforce development opportunities for folks that were going to be in the neighborhood. But they said it needs to be a bridge with benefits, and City Council officially empowered that group, empowered a self-organized neighborhood group to be the sort of voice of the people down there, and to bring ideas up to city government. Now, fast forward a little bit to when I got involved with this project, which was in 2016. So the state of Michigan was responsible for acquiring all of the property needed for the new bridge project, to go in and through eminent domain. It's a construction project, so you can condemn private property, take it, and they were charged with acquiring that. They had the legal authority to do that on this side of the border. Now, the city of Detroit, through a variety of circumstances, owned several hundred properties in the new bridge's footprints, properties they needed to build the bridge landing site and to build the customs plaza. And in 2014, the city of Detroit was under emergency management. It was taken over by the state. And recognizing the economic boon that this new bridge project would potentially provide, the emergency manager, over the objections of city council, made the decision to sell all Detroit's property to Michigan for the bridge. So they went through and he said, I got 301 parcels here. I'm selling it to the state of Michigan for $1 million, which, the properties are virtually worthless. But nothing in that deal took account of what the community group that had previously been empowered by the elected city council was advocating for. So this was, this is emergency management. The state takes over city government. They get to make the decisions. The emergency manager gets to make the decisions. And he decided to sell those 301 properties without any sort of deal in place for the impacted community. The rationale, of course, was, we just can't stand in the way of this major economic development project. Like I said, done over the objections of the elected city council and the neighborhood group. But here's, sometimes government incompetence can be a bad thing, but sometimes it can be a good thing too. So we, once the Detroit's elected city officials were re-empowered, including my current boss, the mayor, we discovered that the emergency manager, they went through and they tried to figure out all the property interests they had in Delray that was needed for the bridge. They missed about 30 properties. They still own 30 properties, and those weren't given over to the state. So we still were holding on to properties. Now that the elected government was re-empowered, we still had some leverage in going into negotiations with Canada and with the state of Michigan to complete this bridge project. And so we were holding on to them. This gave us real leverage. Now, why, you might say? I mean, look, we're the city. We're a subordinate. We're a subordinate entity of the state. Couldn't the state just say, Detroit, tough luck, just like we took you over with emergency management, we're just taking your property away from you and transferring it to the state? Well, maybe. And here's the statute. And my sort of, if any of you guys watch Game of Thrones, my favorite character is Littlefinger, who everybody thinks is a villain, and he is in a lot of respects. He's not a very nice guy, but I will say at least he's like, you know, he doesn't come from the sort of aristocratic families or anything like that, and he's still fighting for the throne. So I respect the hustle, but also he just has the best line, which I use as my litigation mantra, which is chaos is a ladder. And, you know, to the extent that you are going to litigation, just remember that. Chaos is a ladder. You want things to be, if you're trying to be creative with something, you want things to be unclear because it gives you the authority to the ability to argue one side or another. If it's not, if it's really clear, then, you know, the law says what it says and you're kind of screwed if you're on the wrong side of it. If it's chaotic, if it's ambiguous, then you can maybe use it to your advantage. So here's the statute that allows the state to condemn property. And what it says, the state, and I highlighted it, the state can basically condemn land for public use, and they can cause proceedings to be instituted on behalf of the state of Michigan against the land sought to be acquired. And it's very broad, right? It says any land in the actual text of the statute. But look at that. Look in the title. The title says condemnation of private property. We took the position, gosh, we're not private property. The city of Detroit doesn't have private property. We have government property. And so you can't condemn our land. You can't take it away from us. You've got to negotiate with us. Now, that's not in the actual law. It's just in the title. And private property isn't even defined in the section that this comes out of in the laws. But we took the position. We went into negotiation. We were like, look, you can try to condemn it. You can try to take it away, and we'll lock you up in court proceedings, and we'll go up to the Michigan Supreme Court if you have to. But Canada's on the other side of the negotiating table, and they're losing billions of dollars a year with this bridge not being built, right? So they're in a rush. They need this bridge built right away. Maybe we would have won in litigation, maybe we wouldn't have, but our real threat was try it. We're gonna tie you up in litigation. And good luck in your bridge build as we wind up through the Michigan court system. Now you might ask, well, why couldn't the legislature just change the law? I mean, in a normal situation, you'd think like, well, the state of Michigan wants these billions of dollars of intermodal logistics in the city of Detroit. Who cares about these community members in Delray? It's a couple thousand people. Right, the legislature, you know, does not respond to 2,000 people over the well-being of 10 million, and of course the legislature is predominantly Republican, and you'd think they want this economic development project to come to Michigan and to come to Detroit because there's money at issue there. Well, anybody know who this is? He just passed away, so I feel a little bit bad, but this is Matty Maroon. Matty Maroon, remember when I said that Ambassador Bridge? When I said that Ambassador Bridge was privately owned? Matty Maroon is the guy that owns the Ambassador Bridge. That's the Ambassador Bridge. He's got a real interest in making sure this new bridge never gets built because he's got a monopoly on cross-border truck traffic, and he collects tolls for every truck that's crossing into the state of Michigan. So he doesn't want this to happen. Now, in addition to owning the Ambassador Bridge, Matty Maroon owns the Michigan legislature. And this is not just me saying it. For years and years, he bought off, through campaign contributions, totally legal, but he bought off Republican members of the legislature such that they were in his pocket, and there was no way that they were ever going to change this law. They loved the fact that Detroit was standing as an obstacle in these negotiations and was just refusing to give the property away. And so we knew the legislature was not going to simply change the law on us because of the influence, which is in general not a great thing, of Matty Maroon on the legislature and his real vehement interest in stopping this project. So between that legal ambiguity and the Maroon factor, we knew we had a strong negotiating hand. And here's what we did. We decided, look, we're not going to do this thing anymore that we've been doing in Delray and in communities that are impacted by environmental injustice for years. Often you see governments say, we're going to work for you. Don't worry about it. We'll take care of this. We got your back. We don't really need to listen to you. We're going to work for you, and you're going to accept what we have to do. It's a really one-way street. And we opted to work with them. And so the mayor put me in charge of these negotiations with Canada. And what I did was I spent a ton of time in Delray with community groups, with the community advisory group that had been empowered by city council. This is a picture of me, and I'm standing up talking. I wish I had a picture of me listening, because that was really the point. But with the community advisory group in the Delray House, which is the community center over there, and I spent probably 400, 500 hours in 2016 and 2017, just in Delray, meeting with folks, talking to the community activists. The mayor spent significant time down there as well. As we were getting close to the end of the negotiations, the mayor came down there, met repeatedly with the community group. And what we did was what I passed along to read for today was they put together a list of asks. And it was very well done. And this was community up, right? They did surveys, they had meetings, they put together a list of asks that was tied to the impact of the bridge. They pointed out the health consequences, they pointed out the environmental injustice, and they say, look, we are not standing in the way of economic development. We want a bridge with benefits. That's what we need. And I told you the two main things were we need to be able to move if we want to, and we need to be able to be kept safe if people choose to stay. They also wanted a number of other things. And you just think about sort of the day-to-day life. They were expanding the highway to make room for the increased truck traffic. And there is a clinic on one side of the highway, the Chas Clinic, that people use from both sides of the highway. And they said, look, you're going to widen this highway, and it's going to be really tough for a mom with a stroller to dodge traffic and to dodge truck traffic across the expanded service line. So they said, we want the pedestrian bridges to traverse the service lines to the highway that you're expanding out for the trucks. They wanted workforce development opportunities and opportunities to be involved in that, and they wanted a sort of community repair fund for a lot of the for the folks that were staying, for a lot of the historic neglect that Delray had experienced. So we used this as our asks in negotiations, and we had our little 30. The properties were basically worthless. We had our little 30 properties, but we were like, go ahead and try condemning it. And we said, what we need is basically what the community wants. And we'll sell you the properties as soon as you put something in place that takes care of the community's desires. And at the end of the day, Canada and the state of Michigan gave us what we want, for the most part. I mean, it was negotiations, but we got put into place. It was a $48 million deal. By some metrics, it's actually $60 million, because there were changes to the project. I talked about the pedestrian bridge that cost money, expanding that, but we got $48 million effectively in cash from Canada and from the state of Michigan to basically fulfill what the community had asked for. And again, the city was the entity across the table in negotiations with Canada and the state. We were using at all times that blueprint and that set of asks that came up from the community, not that we were dictating down from them. And this I like this picture. City council passed a deal. These are some members of the community advocacy group that had been working for a decade on this. After city council unanimously ratified the agreement, we were just right outside of city council chambers. So it really was a city and community partnership. So what is that? What actually came out because of this? Well, what we did was we got a deal. Money comes into the city of Detroit. And if you live in Delray, if you live in this impacted area and you want to move, we take your house, take title to your house, and you have an option to move to a newly refurbished home elsewhere in the city. We basically swap out your old worthless house and give you one that's newly refurbished in these areas. Depopulation has happened across Detroit, where we've got houses that can be saved and that we can refurbish now with Canadian money. So for those folks that wanted to leave, they now have a newly refurbished home elsewhere in Detroit, and they can move in. And what's been amazing is you've seen the other neighborhoods that have like vacant houses next door to them. They roll out the welcome mat, and they've in many ways been been competing for these new neighbors because they'd much rather have a person living in that house next to them and that house be fixed up with Canadian money than have a vacant home next door that, you know, may ultimately be subject to demolition and maybe a health hazard in and of itself. Those who choose to stay in the area, we're not forcing anybody out. You can stay for as long as you want. You're not getting your services cut off, anything like that. But if you live within that impacted hot zone, where you're going to be subject to increased truck traffic and more fumes, we provide, again, with basically Canadian money, an environmental retrofit of your home. So new HVAC system, air filtration systems, to make sure that where pollution is really the most dangerous, air pollution is actually when you're sleeping at night. It's indoors, and if you got to open the window at night when you're sleeping, then it makes it really difficult to check that pollution. So new HVAC system, new industrial grade air filtration systems, and we're also setting up health monitoring throughout the duration of the bridge construction project, and afterwards, as we see this truck traffic start to come on the other side of the bridge. In addition, we're setting up various air monitoring stations. So the minute that there's a spike, an abnormal spike in air pollution, we'll be aware of it. We've been working in partnership with the University of Michigan and some great partners on that. We also got $10 million in workforce development for the area. So again, this area which is going to be the site of the bridge actually gets to benefit from the jobs that come along with it. So just bring it back to the sort of theoretical standpoints. We ultimately accelerated the transformation of Delray, which is, you know, happening anyway from a residential to a commercial industrial neighborhood. But we didn't do it just by leaving it up to market forces. We didn't do it through a top-down approach. In the long term, you know, people shouldn't be living there. It's a really tough place to raise families. It's an environmental catastrophe zone, but we're not trying to force people out. We're not dictating to people, you must go. We're giving folks the option safely to leave if they want, and a lot of folks felt trapped there, but we're also giving people the option to stay and to mitigate the health consequences if that is their choice to do it. And the hope is that this can serve as a template for decisions regarding other Detroit neighborhoods, because this is not the only neighborhood that has a real environmental justice problem in the city of Detroit. So if we can make this model work, this sort of empowered community model, asking folks like, what do you need, you know, if you feel trapped in the neighborhood, what can we do to make sure that you feel empowered to exercise your choice to live elsewhere and don't have to deal with the adverse consequences of pollution? We can open that door up to them. But we can also say, look, we understand you need to, you know, you may have emotional resonance here. This may be a place that you've raised your family and you want to, you know, retire and live here for the rest of your life if you're an older person. What can we do to make things safer for you? So the success of this story at the end of the day really is not about any sort of brilliant policy cooked up in the mayor's office or, you know, market forces working the way they should or anything like that. It's about the community being empowered, a community up approach to working with government, and government empowering the voices of the communities that are most impacted. I think that is a template for the future, and I'm hopeful that it can be replicated not just in Delray, but in communities that have been adversely impacted by environmental injustice, not just in Detroit, but around the country. So that was my presentation on that.